Welcome back, Reader Pops. Ryan is behind the camera wearing headphones, so I don't think he can hear me, but I still act a little different when he's right behind the camera. Okay, I'm going to be talking about all the books that I read in September. It was a very interesting month. I actually read tons of mega famous books, so this could just be called like a me reading the world's most famous books this month on accident. But first one I listened to on audiobook, and that is the last book in the Caraval trilogy finale by Stephanie Garber, and it's about a magical circus world. It's YA. It's just very whimsical, very fun, very PG. I could recommend it to anyone, and I loved it so much. I think I would give this one 5 stars. I gave Caraval 3 stars, then the second book 4 stars, and the last one 5 stars, but it as a whole series, I feel like I would give 5 stars. And if you listen to it on audiobook and then go on walks, it's just the most magical feeling ever. So I highly recommend it as an audio experience because the types of words that she chooses to write with are just so whimsical and so fun. So I highly recommend this trilogy if you have not read it yet. And now let's get into the mega famous books. So I posted a vlog reading all these books. I did not mean to binge them in 1 week because they're massive fantasy books, but I did. So I posted a video about it. So the first one in the series is called A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. This started off as a YA fantasy romance series, and the first book is heavily inspired by Beauty and the Beast. So by the time I got into this book, I had already watched tons of spoiler reading vlogs and like entire plot explanation videos, and I thought that maybe I wouldn't remember all of the things that I had seen and heard, because when you don't actually know the characters for yourself, I feel like it's hard to piece together what's happening. But as I was reading it, I definitely remembered every single spoiler ever. But if I hadn't known any of the spoilers, this book would have shocked me probably 3 times throughout the book, which would have been really fun. But this series is so hyped up. I already knew all the characters' names. I just didn't know like their actual role in the book. And so it was just really fascinating to finally get to read the story that everyone loves so much. And I gave this first one 4 stars. I think I obviously would have been like freaking out about this if I hadn't spoiled it for myself and probably thought it was like super amazing. It was good. I wasn't obsessed with it, but now I had entryway into the series. So the second book is A Court of Mist and Fury, and this one's like 600 something pages. This one is known to be everyone's favorite because it's very romance heavy in this one. Also, the series started YA and then ended as an adult series. So I think it's like all classified as adult now. This one you get a different character who everyone is obsessed with, who I also became obsessed with. And it's a thick book, but I flew through it. Her writing is just very bingeable. It's very like almost reality TV type style. It's just lots of characters talking, and it's just very easy to get through. And if you're not even a fantasy person, these books can still be read because they're just so romance heavy, I feel like, and so fun. So I gave this one 5 stars. And then I read the third one, which is 700 pages, I think. And this one is about war. This one is like the one that's known as actual plot. Like it's just the most plot heavy out of all the books, and you just follow them over these meetings with all these government officials trying to strategize, trying to betray each other and trick each other. And I found it actually so fascinating, and I almost feel like this one could be classified as my favorite in the series, which I don't see often, but I just really thought it was so smart. Like her being a cunning person who had to trick people was just so fun to read. And it was the first time I actually found political intrigue and war in a book interesting to read about. And I read this massive book really fast. So points for that because that's shocking for me. And then there's a little tiny novella called A Court of Frost and Starlight. It's less than 300 pages, and I did not like this one because you get multiple point of views from different characters who you never have seen their point of view before, but she writes them in 3rd person, and it doesn't flow as like, oh, all the characters have this one goal and we're following it. It's just like random scenes in their life after the war, which is a great idea, but I just didn't really like it in execution really because it just felt so choppy. Like I just couldn't get into the book. I couldn't settle into it. I could have gone without it, but I didn't hate it. I gave it like 3 stars. And then the last book, which is about some other characters from the series, A Court of Silver Flames. This one is the biggest one. It's like 757 pages, and I got it right when the orange cover came out because this had been in hardback for like a year. So it was a great time to start reading the series because they all match. But I got like 270 pages into this book, which is almost like a full-length book, and then I DNF'd it because this one is the spiciest book, and people had told me that, but I just thought like, oh, I could skip through it, but you really can't that much. I don't know. I just didn't really care for it. I was like, I'm just not gonna continue with a 757 page book if most of it is not my style. So I just DNF'd it. I feel like I know what happens in it regardless because of just how popular the series is. Like you can kind of just get a feel for what happens. That was my experience reading the series. If you want to go watch me read it in real time, you can go watch the vlog. Very satisfying covers. And now I know about the most popular fantasy romance series ever. Would I recommend it? I'd recommend the first 3 books, and then I think you're like fine if you haven't read the other ones, but that was fun. And then I did a video where my husband Ryan chose the books that I had to read, and he basically chose all books that he read from his childhood. So you probably have either read these as well, or you know about them because they're so famous. So I read Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, which is book 1. And I actually had read this as a child as well, but I didn't remember that much from it. And it was so autumnal. Like I just didn't realize how fall-esque this book was. It gave me the strongest fall vibes that I've gotten from a book in a really long time. So that was really fun. The first part was a little slow because I hate when he's with his uncle and aunt and they're just mean to him, but then he actually gets to go to the school and they just go on little adventures. And then there was a plot twist at the end that I actually got surprised by, which is shocking because the series is so popular and you would have thought that I knew everything already, but apparently I don't know the story that well. And now I'm extremely excited to read the movies. Watch the movies on a nice fall night, and everyone is telling me to continue the series. So let me know, is book 2 good? Or is it like a get through book 2 and then book 3 is really good? Or what's the vibe with the series? Is it just up from here or what? Because I really liked this. I gave it like 4 stars, but I wasn't obsessed and needing the 2nd, 3rd book and 4th book, 5th, all those different things, but everyone wants me to read it. So please tell me why I should in the comments. And then I read Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief. Is that what it's called? Percy Jackson and the Olympians. Is it the Lightning Thief series by Rick Riordan? I had also read this in middle school, but I think I only read 1/3 of it because the scene that the Medusa scene, I thought was last in the book. It's definitely the middle of the book. So finally got to finish this. Obviously this book is good. Like we all know that it's good, but I don't think it was my book. Like it felt like I was reading a genre that other people enjoy, but it wasn't like my genre, because when I really love books, it feels like this is my book, you know, this was made for me. And I felt like I was kind of spectating on something that other people enjoy, but not me. So a lot of people also told me that the series gets super good by like book 3 or 4 or whatever, but I just don't think it's my cup of tea, but I'm glad that I got to read it because it's such a classic, obviously. And then, okay, this one's not super popular, but it's actually still pretty popular, but it's the historical fiction category, and it's called The Personal Librarian by Marie Benedict and Victoria Christopher Murray. I listened to this on audiobook, and this story is actually so cool because it's based off a true story about Belle DaCosta Green. She was JP Morgan's personal librarian. She would go to auctions for like the Gutenberg Bible or just crazy original classic version books, and she would collect those books for JP Morgan's personal library. And she was actually a Black American woman, but she hid her identity to pass as white. And so because she did that, she got all of these opportunities and she became one of like the most famous, successful women in America. Meanwhile, no one knew her true identity because back in this day, when was this actually? Wow. She was born in 1879 and then died in 1950. That's like way too recent. Yeah, in her lifetime, she would obviously have been very discriminated against if people had known her true identity, so she hid it. And it's just such a crazy story of just like how successful she was. Meanwhile, all these racist people don't know that they're actually respecting someone who they would be racist towards if they had known her true identity. So it was just such a like, I don't know. It was such an interesting story. There were some lines at the end when she's having a conversation with her dad that I really loved. I think it was her dad who said that. There's some quote, I wish I would have underlined it, but I was listening to the audiobook. He said that throughout the decades, they could reach through time and claim her as their own so that one day people would know her true identity. And it's true, like now we do know her true identity, which is just so satisfying that the world gets to know that. So it was just such a fascinating story, and I don't read historical fiction, but this one was amazing to listen to. So I had a good experience with my first historical fiction. If you have any other recommendations, I am down to read. And then back to the video where Ryan chose my books. I read Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card, which they actually made a movie, but I watched the trailer for it and I don't think I'm gonna watch it. But this is a sci-fi book and it's just so fascinating. I gave this book a 5 out of 5 stars. I loved this book and I was not expecting to. It's just such a unique story, and it's about these tiny little kids who are all prodigies, and I love movies and books about prodigies. It's just so satisfying for some reason. You get to read about their greatness and it makes you feel great as a person for some reason, so it's just very fascinating. And I felt very attached to Ender. I still think about him. He feels like a real person to me. And the writing style is super interesting. He switches between third person and first person, but it was fine. Like I didn't mind it at all. I kind of enjoyed it. It's just such a unique story. I don't really want to tell you about like the sci-fi world, but it has deeper messages that you could discuss and debate, and it's just so good. I recommend it. 5 out of 5 stars if you have not read this book. If you just need something different from the normal genre that you read, I highly recommend, because this is not my genre at all and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And lastly, I have a list of like 6 nonfiction books that I've read like the first 50 to 150 pages of and just don't finish. So I finally decided to pick one of those up and just finish the book. And I chose Surprised by Joy by C.S. Lewis. If you guys don't know, he's one of my favorite authors. And this book in particular is kind of his testimony from going from a cynical atheist to Christian, and it was just very fascinating. But I will say, if you're not obsessed with C.S. Lewis, I don't necessarily recommend this book. I don't really recommend it as like, if you want to read a testimony book, I wouldn't give you this one, because he spends the first like 150, 200 pages just talking about his early life in school, and it just seems kind of unrelated for a lot of it. And he also just references every piece of literature he has ever read in his entire life, and it's so niche, and I didn't understand barely any of the references, and you probably wouldn't either unless you're like a crazy reader like he is. And he read them in their original languages. He's just insane. He's so smart. The ending made me cry. He calls himself the most reluctant convert in all of England. If you see it at the library, just read the last 50 pages or something, because it's really cool. I loved it because I'm just gonna read all of his books. Yeah, this was fun to trudge through. All of his nonfiction books are pretty difficult to read, but I'm just obsessed with his writing style. I find it comforting for some reason, because he just has a way of explaining things that I feel and think but would never be able to articulate it, and then he does, and it just like scratches this part of my brain that I need to be scratched. So I highly recommend him if you want some sort of Christian nonfiction books. And those are all the books that I read this month. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Tell me why I should finish the Harry Potter series in the comments down below. And then if you want to keep up with me, I have an Instagram that I post stories on a lot, and then a TikTok, which I've been posting on more, and then also a main channel. So I'll catch up with you guys somewhere else on the internet, and thank you for watching this video. Bye.